He's always had some choice words for those he calls haters, eagerly deflecting criticism or simply ignoring it altogether and complaining he's being harassed. In the first video in particular, he says he'll try to beat the harassment by simply making entertaining videos. This video was uploaded only 3 days later, and from all of these special effects and the wall of text, we can assume that this was his idea of finding entertaining ways to deflect criticism. I'll let you come to your own conclusions about how successful it was. By the way, I feel it's a good time to remind you that he's 25 years old. Jupiter released a few more of these videos, with each of them being more ridiculous than the last. In one video, he seems to be responding to one person called Beta Survivor. Whether this was someone from his DMs is unclear, although it almost definitely wasn't from his comment section, since he seems to have turned those off entirely. In this clip, he makes a threat of violence against this man in order to deter him from pursuing his family. During the rest of this month, it's difficult to ascertain what kind of backlash Jupiter was facing. We know he was likely a target of ridicule from Linda's community, and from his constant stream of quasi-response videos, we know for a fact this nebulous amount of backlash was really getting to him. An amusing side effect is when he was targeted by a very dedicated group of individuals who collectively called themselves Anonymous after the widely popular hacking group. While it's hard to really judge the extent of these people's actions, whatever they were doing was clearly getting under Jupiter's skin. Their comments can be found under some of his videos and streams, like this one. You look like you go to Dave & Buster's to celebrate your case winning against allegations of minors. In a stream on the 17th, Jupiter would go on to talk about this group, and he didn't have a lot of nice things to say about them, to put it mildly.
Really? Anonymous, you followed me here? I told you to leave me alone, and I meant it. Are you guys just happy with tormenting me? Haven't you tormented me
Really,
enough?
Anonymous?
Get off my YouTube
Really,
right
Anonymous?
now. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of all of you. How about you each eat Anonymous?
There are a few people throughout who he seems to be responding to, but it's likely most of them were blocked, which is why we can't see their messages. However, 2 users remained to chat with him, spending the whole stream agitating him, accusing him of doing unscrupulous things with minors. In particular, they mentioned someone named Paige, who I've found nothing about, but given the way Jupiter responds to her being brought up, accusing her of being a private investigator, we can make some assumptions about who she may be. Notably, the hecklers also bring up Abby, to which Jupiter responds with extreme hostility.
Don't threaten Abby. She's done nothing to you. Leave her out of this. You need to piss off. Get off my YouTube. Do not drag Abby into this shit. She's innocent. She's done nothing to you. She's my one and only.
Oh
Abby
god,
is.
that's her.
She's my one and only girlfriend. So please.
She's my
stop
one and only
bringing her into
girlfriend.
this. Anonymous.
In his rants,
Anonymous.
he ends up revealing
Oh.
a photo of Abby, and he continues
Anonymous.
to talk about her for a while,
Oh.
telling the 2 people in chat not to bring her up. He also insists she's 21 years old and not a minor, in order to prove that he's not
Anonymous.
a PDF file. This harassment campaign would continue for the entirety of the month, as most of the videos and streams since then contained comments left by these people. They would also keep popping up during streams. As you can see, he was clearly facing backlash, and he would often come to complain about it on live. But besides the odd comment and heckler in chat, it was mostly contained to TikTok. It would be devastating to anyone genuinely trying to make a career out of TikTok, but given that Jupiter clearly never had a shot of that anyway, you may argue it made very little difference. Throughout June, with Linda Binda even continuing to entertain his existence with the clear intention of further trolling the poor, foolish creature, asking her audience to send in questions for the next interview, which would be released on the 24th of the same month. At this point, you may think you know what to expect from Jupiter, but if your thought process is that you should know to expect the unexpected, you're right. Once again, this video starts off harmless enough, with Linda relaying the questions that have been asked by her viewers. The questions are obviously asked in jest, but Jupiter answers them in earnest. From questions like how realistic Twilight is, or what mythical creature is your worst enemy. Interestingly, amid these questions, one of the viewers asks if his eyes change color.
When my eyes glow a subtle blue, that's usually when my eyes are that's when I'm feeling kind of out of it and down. My eyes will glow a whitish red color if I'm pissed off. And when I'm just feeling happy, my eyes stay the color they are.
Here, he says that his eyes change to light blue when he's sad and pale red when he's angry.
I
However,
can give myself my own orgasm. That's about the most craziest thing I've ever claimed on camera. That, and I've steered my cat around with my mind while I was on acid. And I've rolled 28 snake eyes in front of 7 witnesses. I've got the witnesses, you know. I
actually a contradiction of a previous statement he had
and he was like, you're an outlier. You're just an outlier. And I was like, no, I can do it.
Made back in the first interview, where he clearly states his eyes changed to ghostly pale blue.
But I did that in front of a math class, or I wouldn't say it. Like, these are people in my school. They'll remember it. Like, you know?
My eyes.
But this shit is, like, a bit different.
And I'm really pissed off, though. My eyes will glow a ghostly pale blue. when I'm pissed off, like when I'm really angry.
Now, this contradiction could mean multiple things. Either he's simply been lying about all of this and can't keep his story straight, which is the real one, or he's struggling to remember his own delusional ramblings. Some people did use this to make
delusional ramblings. I know those pretty well. Yeah, I'm crazy. Don't listen to me. Yes. Being a streamer, it's like it's like your whole world is a diarrhea. Your whole world is a diary of diarrhea that just spews out of your mouth. It's the diary of diarrhea, right? You spew out your mouth and you don't care what anybody says, and you just keep going with your mouth. You're like, oh, I'm spewing some diarrhea now. Diary of diarrhea.
to claim he's just an elaborate troll, although as you'll find out,
Elaborate
that
troll.
is not the case.
No,
as
he's
often
just an
happens
idiot.
with this absolute unit of a man,
He's just
the
an
video
idiot,
only becomes
trust
more
me.
and more unhinged. When Linda relays
Elaborate
the question
troll.
of what is Jupiter's
Who the fuck
deepest,
is an
darkest
elaborate
secret,
troll?
She says one of the most
Trump?
alarming things
Trump
out of
is an
everything he's said
elaborate
so far.
troll.
He
The only
professes to
elaborate
have a
troll
deep
I've ever heard
desire
of is
to
Trump.
blame and every single person who's
sorry.
ever wronged him in any way at all, be it the people who spoke ill of him in public, people who have insulted him, or anything and everything in between. He continues that he's thought a lot about it, and he's even worked out the best way to hide the bodies, admitting it would be quite easy due to how remote the area he lives in actually is.
What's your deepest, darkest fantasy?
My darkest fantasy is to watch all those who wronged me by my hand. That's my darkest.
Once again, a question is asked about Jupiter's
killed their tank, does
keyword
that count?
tendencies, and he clarifies that he doesn't talk to children anymore. He claims to have been set up, saying he was tired and high off nicotine when he did something with kids.
I took the
Not
point,
quite
does that
clear
count?
What he did, as the actual story from his old TikTok is murky at best, since no one bothered to archive it all. An interesting story comes up when Jupiter mentions
Oh,
being
come
engaged to Abby.
on.
Not much is really revealed about her beyond what we've discussed, and Linda herself only used it as a vehicle to dive even deeper into her roleplay of a woman deeply in love with Jupiter. Another interesting question asked of him is about whether his ex-roommate and his brother are convicted predators, to which he responds that only his brother was convicted. It's
Only
not
his
clear if
brother.
this is the same brother we brought up in the intro of the video, but it's a fair guess. He does go on to imply that he believes the charges should have been dropped. On the same note of the brother he mentioned here, we actually do have a record of him. His name is Shane, and he's serving a sentence for exploitation in the state of Washington until 2027. This is believed to
Oh,
be
of
the
course
same
he
man
is.
who had assaulted Jupiter. And as an extra aside, he's actually only one of the two of Corbin's siblings arrested for exploitation, with the second one being Duke, someone who must have been close enough to Jupiter to feature in one of his own videos.
Oh
Sadly,
my
or perhaps
God,
graciously,
please
this
let
is
me
about
live.
it for the interview in terms of anything interesting. This YouTube video accrued the
get a
same
kill,
amount
huh?
of views as last time, and the clips of the video on TikTok gathered over 5 million views combined. At this point, we can say with some certainty that the man has become infamous. As we already mentioned, his original TikTok account has been banned, and while we don't know exactly when, he would release a video on his second
Oh
channel
my
on the 25th of June,
God.
where he said his main account has just been deleted, implying it was due to rule violations of some sort, albeit he doesn't specify what kind. This was followed by another TikTok on the same day, which was nothing but a collection of pentagrams with the main message being that he was alive and kicking. Whether the channel was taken down because of the latest interview with Linda or for some other reason is not clear, but what we can say with a lot of certainty is that this channel deletion will become a precursor to a whole slew of trouble. Clips from his earlier streams began to circulate around TikTok on channels such as Jupiter's_videos, in which Jupiter does his best to dig an even deeper hole for himself. Here, you'll find everything from a video of him barking at his viewers, only to snap back to reality and pretend he'd just been possessed, to further defending his own pedophilic tendencies. That video in particular gives us an even deeper insight into the kind of person Jupiter is, or at least the kind of person he wants us to believe he is. He explains that due to suffering from both ADHD and autism, his age is almost irrelevant, as he is just a child mentally. He goes on to explain that he can't even really tell what he is anymore, and that he's afraid of getting close to people because he's worried he'll hurt them. By and large, these videos didn't get that much attention. People had a negative view of him already, but arguably he
Oh,
hadn't become
God,
notorious
get off
yet.
me!
The Linda Binda drama,
Get off
while
me!
big for what it was not mainstream, and it hardly ever left the sphere of her own fan base, and perhaps a vaguely
Damn
adjacent
it,
TikTok
no.
viewer base.
No!
And the same can be said for his dealings with Anonymous,
What?
which really just flew under everyone's radar. But before I go any further, a word from today's sponsor. Have you recently been injured in a horrific accident, don't know where to start? Well, look no further than Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm.
Oh,
with
come
over
on, they're
800 attorneys
5v1ing
operating in
or
49
1v5ing?
states, not
Okay.
Rhode Island. They're a
That's good.
national
You guys gave the
consumer-facing
point to
brand
them,
with
huh?
a promise of being for the people. Morgan & Morgan has modernized the injury law process so you can submit a claim and have it reviewed by a lawyer without ever having to leave the couch. You can sign documents, upload pictures, share medical records and doctor bills all from your phone. You can even text message your attorney and case manager without having to go into an office. And their fee is free. You only pay if you
Oh
pay.
my
They've got
God.
100 offices nationwide and over 800 local lawyers, along with a 4,000 person support staff available at any hour to help with your case. So join the 3 million people who call them every year in a time of need. If you're ever injured in an accident, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Submit a claim in 8 clicks or less without even having to leave your couch. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/turkeytom or dial #law.
All right, now I'm
That's
just gonna
pound
kill them all.
529
Fuck
from
it.
your cell phone. Once again, forthepeople.com/turkeytom to start the process. Good luck. Jupiter himself, meanwhile, continued to post to his YouTube and TikTok. While his YouTube selection did include some more paranormal stuff, the TikToks were largely a deflection of the criticism he'd gotten in the last couple of months, constantly trying to shame those who would quite justifiably call him a PDF file in the most cringeworthy way he could possibly muster. On the 29th of June, Linda Binda had recorded another interview with Jupiter, which would later be uploaded in full to her YouTube channel. This interview is quite noteworthy among all of the other interviews she's made, as one thing you'll quickly notice is just how hostile Jupiter seems throughout. The first few minutes are quick to set the tone for the whole interview, where he emphatically demands that people should stop calling him a P-word, claiming it's already over and done with, getting angry when viewers ask him somewhat silly questions like whether he eats a raw meat because he's a werewolf. We can't quite be sure what he's thinking at this moment, but given he's no longer on camera, it's possible he might have finally caught onto the bit, or
What?
at least he's worried about incriminating himself further. Not that that stops him from saying some of the most suspicious statements that I've ever heard.
What's he saying?
He sees you as his mother and or his sister.
Sister?
Perspective.
I'm not
Like
in.
his stepsister, like the hot stepsister.
Yeah.
He calls you his hot stepsis. He's like, I don't really see her as my mom, more like a hot stepsis.
One of the more interesting parts of the interview, besides Jupiter teaching Linda how to create a homunculus and then going on to communicate with Linda's bee plushie, was a moment towards the tail end of the whole interview. Linda starts talking about how she would challenge her uncle to play a game of sackpock, with the punchline being that the uncle had no legs. Jupiter took this opportunity to talk a little bit about how he feels about that uncle, and how despite the things the uncle had done to Linda, he still clearly loved her. In particular, he mentions the one time her uncle supposedly locked her in a cage, and he explained that the reason her uncle had done it is simply because he loved her and couldn't imagine parting from her. He even implies that the uncle, who's supposedly dead at this point, had actually faked his own death as a way of telling Linda he's sorry.
You know all the things he said he did that was bad?
Like what? I forgot.
Where he said he locked you in a cage or whatever?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he did that because he loved you and he didn't want to lose you.
This channel isn't exactly the sort of place for detailed psychoanalysis, but in my silly YouTuber opinion, there's probably more behind this little statement than meets the eye. Knowing all the dark things we know from his childhood, it makes you wonder what else he suffered at the hands of Shane. But of course, given there's now potential he's actually in on the bit and just doing a bit of trolling, perhaps he knows the whole story was made up in the first place. But if he did know it was a bit, why even stick around longer and keep incriminating himself? As the interview draws to a close, Jupiter takes one more opportunity to threaten those who would call him a P-word, and when asked about Discord CP, he insists that he doesn't have things like that anymore. Overall, while the interview garnered about the same amount of attention as the last three, this was arguably the least damaging to his reputation. Of course, at this point, he can hardly be argued to have much of a reputation, to the point where it would be hard to imagine him sinking any lower. In the midst of this, Jupiter found himself in a quaint little bit of drama when he stumbled across an account called Corbin Pinnell 1998. It is ostensibly a satire account, with most of the early videos on it being satirical versions of the exact videos Jupiter himself was posting. As you can see, these videos are pretty harmless, especially if you consider the sheer magnitude of accusations that Jupiter was already facing. Yet, of all the people he may have taken umbrage with, he focused his sights on this dainty little meme account. On the 1st of July, only 2 days after Corbin Pinnell 1998 released his first video, our rotund friend would go on to make 5 videos all about this channel, trying to assert his position as the one and only real Jupiter. Throughout the series of rants, he wanted an entire character arc, wherein he started off just denying any possibility that this meme account was actually him, only to eventually switch gears and offer him a chance to work together, seemingly convinced that he was a Jupiter from another dimension.
Where did you come from? And what timeline are you from? Because if you're from an alternate timeline, like you say, that means that you're me who's come from a different universe and a different time-space continuum.
With these videos, Jupiter enjoyed an unprecedented amount of viewers, getting dramatically more clicks than any of his previous videos. In fact,
Oh,
the
come
first of these videos
on.
managed to get 1.9 million views, which, while not as impressive on TikTok compared to YouTube, is still 10
Oh
times more
my
than any of his
God.
previous posts. Given that, it would actually
can't
make sense to assume that he was
believe we
simply
lost
milking it
this,
even
kill
more
him.
for views, which, if that were the case, worked out for him quite beautifully. But he would not get
What?
to enjoy this little bump
Run
in
to the
viewership for very long,
point.
as the relative obscurity that
Oh
had
my
shielded him from the attention
God.
of the wider public was about to be broken.
Well,
it started
I
off
had,
with
like-
Linda Binda and a content creator going by Lugrim collaborating on a live interview of Jupiter on the 1st of July. This one is a lot different in terms of tone compared to the others, not least of all due to the subject matter. In this stream, Linda and Lugrim called Jupiter out for talking to minors, who had since come out to talk about it publicly. This interview is no longer available on Linda's channel, and the only re-uploads of it we could find don't seem to have the entirety of it there. But from the clips we could gather, he admitted to talking to these
Notice
girls
he
in a
says we, but I don't think there's a we.
appropriately, although he wasn't too eager to actually take accountability for his actions, claiming it was a simple transgression.
Now, he might have an
remained
editor,
completely
yeah.
unfazed when Linda pointed out how he had allegedly sent an explicit image to girls as young as 13 years old. This one clip of it we have has been recorded by Desperate Housewives, an account belonging to a girl named Sophia, who, as we'll later be able to confirm, is one of the girls involved in this whole mess. On the 2nd of July, she posted a video that had been sent to her by Jupiter himself.
Sophia, I know that you're crushing on me.
Oh.
So here's my video to you. The reason why I want to be your boyfriend is
Oh.
because I need someone who's human to share my lonely nights with my human half. The reason why I'm asking you this is because my human half gets lonely, and I want to be able to see you again.
It's already weird enough he sent this to any girl, quite frankly, but it pales in comparison to the fact that all of these girls are supposedly minors. Sophia went on to disseminate a lot more videos of this nature, claiming a lot of them were sent to her friends. While a lot of this is hard to verify, the fact that videos exist at all kind of speaks for themselves, at least as far as the cringe level.
Well, this little devil wants you to know the reason why he wants you to date him is because if you
This
like
little
what you
devil
see,
wants
take
you to
it.
know.
If you like what you want, you know you want, then grab it.
Grab
you know
it.
the price and buy it.
You know the price. Buy it.
These are the reasons why I want you to date me.
These videos
These
are
are the
going to get
reasons
tens
why I
of
want you
millions
to
of views,
take
with the most viewed clip on the topic getting over 20 million. It goes without saying that the sheer amount of attention gained was monumental, and that was reflected on Jupiter's personal channel. Coincidentally, or perhaps due to the videos, the last TikToks available on Jupiter's account are from the 2nd of July, and they don't even begin to address any of this new attention, as he instead still tried to milk the imposter situation, threatening to sue this guy to protect his name. Whether he stopped because of these videos coming out is not quite clear. That said, while he wouldn't release anything on his TikTok channel, he did do a stream on his YouTube account, which remains clandestine as ever. Out of all the streams that he's done, this one may just be the creepiest. The whole point of the stream, it seems, is to chat up this one girl in live chat, as no one else comes to visit in the entire thing. The chat at first is relatively harmless, albeit it is kind of strange given the context of what we know Jupiter is like. But then, things start getting weird.
Are you crushing on me? By the way, Kristen, you crushing on me?
If you glance at the chat, you'll see a confirmation that Kirsten is indeed a woman, and that she may have a slight crush on Jupiter. But if you think that's weird, just wait till you see this.
You're in love with me, then tell me. Okay, promise I won't judge.
To this question, the girl gives a much more emphatic answer, telling Jupiter that she loves him. After a brief bit of rambling, Kirsten begins asking for Jupiter's
Oh,
social
God.
media, which he's very eager to provide, giving her his phone number and Snapchat. It's here that we find out two things. One, there was actually another person there at the same time, one who may have been blocked from the chat after the fact, or perhaps someone whose account was deleted. Two, we'll find out
I can't believe that
when
works.
Jupiter is questioned
I
as to
can't
her
believe that
age,
works.
he says he doesn't have any problem with it. Now, we don't actually know how old this girl was, as the message was most likely removed during the stream. But given what we already know about Jupiter, I don't think anyone should be given the benefit of the doubt here. From here, the timeline of events becomes quite
Thank
unclear,
you,
which
Baited.
tends to happen when you're dealing with such short time frames. But when in doubt, it never hurts to check his YouTube channel. On the 4th of July, Jupiter would do an extremely short stream. He doesn't actually say much at all here, and we're frankly not sure what the point of the stream even was. However, I couldn't be more glad that this stream happened, because we end up finding out something very, very juicy. Remember Sophia, the girl who uploaded all those creepy TikToks of Jupiter trying to flirt? What you almost definitely didn't know is that Sophia is someone who's actually already introduced you to. If you look at the live chat, you'll see a vaguely familiar name. Vivian Blair, the girl who's moderated his YouTube chat chat since June. She reveals to the chat, presumably Jupiter himself, that she's actually Sophia on TikTok. She then apologizes profusely to him, and from Jupiter's acting, it seems he feels quite hurt by it. It was a very one-sided back and forth, with Vivian definitely trying to catch Jupiter's attention for most of it, as well as trying to message him on Snapchat. Now, it's worth pointing out that I have no idea who this person truly is. There's every chance this girl has been trolling Jupiter since the beginning, in which case, fair play. But in the event that this is actually all real, I have to say, this little interaction may be one of the more disturbing things of the whole story, if only for the fact that it's fully archived for us to witness. This would be his last ever video on YouTube. All that remained now is TikTok. At some point, Jupiter released an apology where he fully admits to having been a PDF file. With a stooped head, he begs for forgiveness and even breaks down crying. It's not clear how genuine this apology is, but given how long he's lied about it at this point, it honestly doesn't mean that much, and he more than likely hoped it would get him out of trouble. As you'll find out, he wouldn't get so lucky. The circumstances behind where this video is from get kind of confusing. That same confession was uploaded on the same day to a different channel without any of the overlays of music. This channel seems to have videos by Jupiter that don't exist anywhere else, which suggests it's some sort of alternate account of his, or someone super dedicated to archiving. This idea is somewhat reinforced when you look at the earliest videos of the channel, which were uploaded on the 3rd of July, where he claims to have teamed up with his imposter in order to fight the Nexus. From what I can gather, there seems to be some belief that the imposter actually convinced Jupiter to give a full video confession, which is what we saw earlier. This alternative account contains one more apology video, which seems to have been recorded prior to the other one I showed. This is much shorter, and he definitely doesn't seem to be taking this very seriously, talking about how he's been cut off from the Jupiter bloodline due to his shameful actions.
It is with heavy heart that I am no longer part of the Jupiter bloodline. My father
The
has
Jupiter
disowned.
bloodline,
I only
the Jupiter
beg for your
bloodline.
forgiveness, and I will seek whatever punishment comes after.
I will
The other
seek
videos
whatever
on this channel
punishment.
were uploaded on the 6th of July.
The
where he
Jupiter
engages in his
bloodline.
habit of making very silly threats to his haters, including a video where he says he'll drag and show his enemies off the cliff. For this next part, let's return to Siwa News. While a very minor player in the whole saga, Siwa is perhaps one of the only YouTubers who's been calling out Jupiter since before Linda went against him publicly. She would go on to make a stream on the 2nd of July, breaking down the most recent controversies regarding him, and using much of her time to psychoanalyze Jupiter based on the responses he gave to being questioned. Eventually, Siwa launched a second stream talking about Jupiter. Largely, this went over the things we've already covered, including the infamous apology. And, other than explaining the recent drama, Siwa invites on a very special guest, Abby, the same girl Jupiter was claiming to be engaged to, and she gives a rather fascinating account of the kind of person Jupiter is. According to her, she and Jupiter first met when she was 14, with him being 18 at the time. Initially, they started off being just friends, but it quickly developed into a relationship. She claims they were boyfriend and girlfriend while she was 14, and that at the time of the interview, she was indeed his fiancée, with genuine plans to eventually marry him. Throughout the interview, Siwa reveals to Abby, and by extension the viewers, that he's actually supposed to be under constant supervision, because a court order deemed him unfit to take care of himself. Abby is surprised by this, although she does confirm he lives in a group home, which contradicts his testimony, wherein he said he lived with his brother. At one point, she admits to physically meeting Jupiter in Melba during the 4th of July, going as far as to say he hurt her physically, something she had kept a secret practically up until the moment she said it on air. The interview is cut short by Abby suddenly disconnecting due to technical issues, and she's not brought on again for the rest of the stream, leaving us wondering what else could have been revealed by her. Interestingly, if you look at the comment section of this stream, you'll find a comment from someone who's claiming to be a part of this faux anonymous group that's been hunting down Jupiter, going on to claim he's also the owner of the Jupiter Satire channel. He claims that his group of friends convinced Jupiter they were a tribunal of godly beings who were sentencing him for his crimes against children and threatening to remove his powers if he didn't confess. While there's no way to confirm this, given what we already know about Jupiter the Hybrid, I'm ready to believe it. While Abby's stream didn't end up being too consequential, the 7th of July would end up being significant for a different reason. On that day, the Nampa Police Department released a statement on their Facebook page talking about executing a search warrant at his residence involving internet crimes against children. In a later video, Linda Binda would claim that Jupiter had all of his social media and mobile devices seized, being kicked out of the place he lived and forced to live with his father. It's not clear what evidence she's drawing from, as I wasn't able to find an arrest record, but given that he stopped uploading so suddenly, it's definitely within the realm of possibility. Perhaps even worse for him, more clips will begin to come out, even further incriminating it. The same satire account will post a clip from a TikTok live stream in which Jupiter states quite
idiots.
bluntly that his apologies were effectively worthless,
I love
and that he
calling
only
them
posted
names,
them in
it's
hopes
fun.
of pleasing the masses.
Fun
He
for
scarcely
me.
seems to
I've fucked my life, but not like these guys. I've fucked my life over, I definitely have, but not like these guys. Not like these guys at all.
exhibit any of the
Oh
shame
my
from his apology
God.
videos, which definitely speaks to his motivation. Besides that, Linda Binda would also release a teaser of a documentary she was producing about Jupiter, and with her announcement, she included a clip of Jupiter admitting on air that he wouldn't mind receiving naughty content from a 13-year-old.
Jupiter, can I still send you pictures of myself even if I'm underage? Because I'm only 13.
It's up to you, sweetie, if you want to, because I don't mind. If you do, I don't mind. Do you plan on turning me in if I say yes?
No, I would never.
Of course, the couple of extra clips of him being outright heinous were only a precursor to the veritable smorgasbord of attention that Jupiter would receive throughout the rest of July. While he continued getting all kinds of attention on TikTok, likely unaware of any of it due to his blanket ban on electronics, the real difference came on YouTube, where his antics caught the attention of large YouTubers. The first video on the topic I could find was made by SoD. He goes over the same things we've already discussed. He also shows clips from another interview with
I
Jupiter.
feel like you're
conducted
trying
by a
to
TikToker
jacking this
named
for me, but
Luca,
it's
who we've
alright, I'll
already
run
shown.
this.
This interview has since been deleted, with the only
It's
traces
alright.
of it being Reddit posts with clips from it. In it, he essentially explains the process
With
of creating
clips
a
from it.
homunculus again, talks to her about how she shouldn't swear, how he would like to move her soul into a human host, but because she's picky, he hasn't been able to find one. The video ended up getting almost 100,000 views, but it would truly go mainstream later in July with the coverage from a YouTuber named Underflow. This video was a more thorough attack on Jupiter, using a whole plethora of clips and other evidence to prove his thesis that Jupiter is a predator. This video got 700,000 views, propelling the topic to the mainstream. It didn't take long for others like Sensitive Society to hop on the bandwagon. Outside of the YouTube sphere, Jupiter was ragged on by just about everybody, but the person in the forefront of all this was definitely Linda Binda herself, who seemed to have made it her mission to take Jupiter down. After all, she was part of the reason he had been known by so many people. In late July, she began releasing updates on Jupiter's situation, including the fact that all of his devices were seized. She gave a brief recap of how she had met Jupiter and her whole relationship with him. She lamented her own role in propelling him to fame, or infamy, arguing he may not have had the opportunity to engage with so many minors if she hadn't made him so popular. As bad as the month of July was for Jupiter's name, August would fan the flames even further as more
What?
evidence came out. Most of that was released by Linda Binda herself, and while she didn't provide a source, many of the videos she showed on her TikTok speak for themselves. The first of these was a video from August.
come
In it, she
on.
mentioned how Jupiter was still not apprehended, and she hopes her new proof will put him behind bars. This proof is a video of Jupiter talking to who he believes to allegedly, supposedly, be a 15-year-old, asking her if she wants to star in an adult video with him.
Have you ever thought about maybe becoming a star? Have you ever thought about that? I mean, what if you and I decided to make, if ever you and I got married and we decided to make our own videos, and we added them to different sites and they paid us a butt ton of money, would you consider doing it with me every time?
For context, this is someone that Jupiter got was from the ages of 14 to 15 years old. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He even said it multiple times. Like, the police can't do anything about it because they will imprison someone who has mental issues. So he knew what he was doing was wrong.
She would slowly continue to drip feed pieces of information on Jupiter. All this time, she's continued to tease the documentary. Eventually, however, she released a bombshell when she announced she'd be interviewing Jupiter's actual sister, where they would talk about Jupiter. As the anticipation for this video built, more and more people began releasing their own videos about Jupiter, with Underflow releasing update videos. The month of August would see the release of even more robust videos on the topic, with Smokey MCC chiming in with a half-hour in-depth takedown, in which his main focus were the Linda Binda interviews. Despite new info being relatively scant, the issue remained extremely hot throughout all of August, with multiple content creators releasing videos, including another update from Underflow and another breakdown of the situation by Hi I'm Wonder, who you guys may remember from the
At least he
Illuminati
explained it.
situation. But the topic would cool down in the month of September as people stopped talking about it. However, as October rolled around, the content farm received another jolt of energy, as Linda's highly anticipated interview finally dropped on the 6th. In that interview, Linda addressed the sister as Kia, although whether that's just a pseudonym or her actual name is not clear. Here's the rough story of her and Jupiter growing up, according to Kia. Kia describes their childhood as relatively normal for the first few years of them living together, with the exception of their older brother, Shane, abusing them. For those of you who weren't keeping up, Shane is the one currently sitting in Washington State Prison on sexual abuse charges.
We had like a fairly okay childhood. I mean, yes, him and I have some sexual abuse trauma. We have very similar trauma. I have a little bit more than he does. Our brother Junior, or Shane, as most people know him, he wasn't a very good brother.
According to Kia, she and Jupiter got along really well as kids, playing together and just spending a lot of time around one another. However, she noted that there was a marked change in their relationship around the time she was 11. Their foster mother began to treat Jupiter very differently compared to some of the other siblings in Jupiter's age range. In particular, she described how Jupiter would often be coddled by her, and whenever he did something wrong, she would simply blame it on his autism, claiming he isn't liable for the bad decisions he makes.
Like, can very well tell he does indeed know what he's doing. I would be sitting on the complete opposite side of the room, coloring. He'd lose a game and he'd walk over and he'd throw whatever remote he had in his hands at my head. And I would tell my mom, and my mom would call him into her office, she would scold him, and then nothing would happen.
As time went on, things only got worse, as by the time the kids were going through puberty, Jupiter, having never been taught inhibition, started to frequently his sisters. Once again, his mother would brush off the concerns of her daughters by saying he was autistic and it wasn't his fault. Kia described that Jupiter repeated this behavior towards her very frequently, and it got so bad that it caused bruises to appear all over her body. This would not stop until one day when she responded to Jupiter's attempts by smacking him across the face, and he apparently never touched her past that point.
It got so bad where I actually had to get my dad involved, because I would tell my mom and she'd say, like, he just doesn't know what he's doing. He has got a UPVC, and so I finally ended up telling my dad, and my dad said, well, if he does it, just go ahead and smack him. So I did. He never touched me like that again.
The topic of Junior, or Shane, was brought up multiple times, specifically in relation to what had happened between him and Jupiter. She recalled an incident during which her mom would walk into their shared bedroom, where she saw Shane had fastened Jupiter to a chair with both of them nude. I'll let you fill in the blanks on what Shane was actually doing there.
But what had happened was my mom had just gotten home. She was heading back down the hallway to the bathroom, and she happened to look over at the boys' door, and on the door was a sign that said, "Don't come in, we are playing naked." So she opened the door. Shane had used, I think, their ties to tie him up to the chair and was tucking him inappropriately.
Yeah, things are getting pretty dark, so if this kind of thing really bothers you, now would probably be the time to tap out, because it's not getting better, unfortunately. On the topic of Jupiter, she recalled an event during which her sister, and Jupiter were all sitting in the backseat of a car when he suddenly grew enraged and started choking Kia with the seatbelt, and then turned around to try and choke out her sister. The only thing that dissuaded him was a threat from Kia. On a later occasion, she claimed that he would physically assault her on multiple occasions, going as far as to say on some of these occasions, genuine attempts were made at me. In particular, she recalls two instances. One happened when she was 16 and she was tasked with making sure Jupiter, then 17, would take a proper bath before going to school, a task given to her by their father. Jupiter was notoriously unwilling to bathe, and he would often go a long time without washing himself. So when Kia had attempted to wrangle him into taking a bath, he responded violently, chasing her across the house, pinning her down, and attempting to choke her out. I mean, we may as well just call Jupiter Kimbo Slice at this point, because he's really going for those submissions. Kia notes that this is actually the first time she could remember her brother getting genuinely punished, although she in turn also got punished for not managing to convince him to take the bath, allegedly. Prompted by Linda, Kia also breaks down Jupiter's hygiene, and in particular she describes the kind of smell that had become his trademark scent of sorts, which she could always recognize if he had been in the room just by the smell. She describes it as a nauseating mix of sweat, musk, and due to his rather poor hygiene habits, urine and fecal matter. When Linda asks if the brown spot on his current mattress is actually dirt, as claimed by Jupiter, Kia responds that it's probably not dirt. Yeah. This transitions into a discussion about whether Jupiter was even potty trained, to which Kia responds that due to their mother's coddling, he had never even begun to be potty trained until the age of 17. What? However, Kia claims this potty training never actually stuck, which meant his mother continued to clean him up, until his dad finally put a stop to it and told him to wear adult diapers. Kia goes on to say that he most likely wears adult diapers to this day, which would again maybe explain that brown patch on the mattress. After this little tangent, they refocus on the incident when Jupiter had almost strangled her. According to her, their dad forced their mom to put Jupiter in a group facility in order to protect the rest of the kids. After Jupiter was moved out, their mother continued to focus on him. This is one example of where Kia's story kind of contradicts the version mentioned by Jupiter. If you'll recall from the start, he describes being put in this group facility when he was 15, and he makes it seem as though the mom is the one solely responsible for that decision. Of course, since neither he nor Kia are really providing any proof of their claims, either one of them could be correct. The topic shifts back to Jupiter's creepy sexual antics, as Kia reveals how Jupiter would often try to watch her take a shower. She recalled one specific incident when she asked her mom to make sure Jupiter wasn't watching and she was getting out. Then, when she left the bathroom with a towel on, she saw Jupiter watching her, despite the fact she had told her mom to make him not do that. After this, the focus again is on Jupiter's violent tendencies. Kia reveals how Jupiter would constantly threaten her and her sisters for every conceivable and inconceivable slight, be it not handing the controller over fast enough, picking a movie he didn't want to watch, singing too loud, and anything and everything in between. To only the slightest, most minute scolding from their mother, who made sure to remind him, "Hey buddy, you're not supposed to speak like that." After extensively covering her history with Jupiter growing up, Kia would speak about her own mental condition due to having to live with him and Shane, saying she suffers from PTSD. She also mentions how she has a restraining order against Jupiter. Once they're done exploring the history, the topic shifts to what's been happening recently. In particular, his social media presence. Kia brings up how, when creating all of his social media accounts, he wasn't using his own phone number, and had instead stolen his sister's phone number, which led to her receiving hundreds of death threats and a lot of harassment from people who believed it was Jupiter's personal account. There's some discussion about many of the things we've already gone over, including the rather infamous apology video, and Kia notes that this kind of tacit apology, followed by constant reoffending of that same behavior, is exactly what she and her siblings had to go through time and time again. A rather ominous question is asked by Linda, regarding how Kia thinks an interaction between Jupiter and a child would go if they were left alone in the same room. Kia suggests that if the person was 10 or below, she would imagine Jupiter hurting them physically, breaking a bone, or inflicting other grievous injuries. If they were older than 11, she reckons he would try to, She also mentions that he may not engage with someone 17 or older because they would be able to defend themselves, which he doesn't fight. The interview eventually concludes on a somewhat dour note, as both Linda and Kia lament that Jupiter was still a free man, and that once his ban on electronics would run out, he would likely just go back to doing the same things he had been doing previously, with nothing in the way of accountability. Overall, the interview serves to recontextualize much of how we see Corbin, giving us an insight into why he may be the person he is today. Of course, we have to keep in mind that there's nothing in the way of evidence provided, leaving us with a plausible but not actually confirmable story of his past. Sadly, one of the interview's predictions would also come true, as Jupiter reappeared on TikTok a few days later. While the account which the video was posted on is banned, Linda, Binda, and others were diligent enough to archive it.
You all honestly think I'm gonna go to prison? Check your facts before you do anything stupid. And back the hell up, and back the hell down. Final warning, people. Leave me alone.
As mentioned before, however, this account would not last long, and in fact, it seems that every account he's been making in an attempt to return to the platform has been banned very quickly. Clearly, someone at TikTok is watching and knows to get rid of him. One of the only things that remain are re-uploads of his older videos. Why he never returned to the Corbin Pinnell account is a mystery, although since it was apparently on his family's phone number, he may have been locked out of it entirely. While Jupiter may have hoped that this 3 months of absence would leave him relatively clear of any more exposés, any such hopes would have been dashed just a few days later, with the release of perhaps one of the most comprehensive takedowns of Jupiter ever made. On the 18th of October, a channel called Mr. Snowflake released a 40-minute breakdown composed entirely of clips from Jupiter himself, with not a single word spoken by the creator. In this, he shows a lot of clips that haven't been shown anywhere else, be it on TikTok or YouTube, including Jupiter breaking down his childhood again. In fact, were it not for Mr. Snowflake, we never would have found Jupiter's YouTube channel, which would have removed a lot of the context we have on his story. Overall, it was arguably one of the best videos ever made on the topic, along with his 2 continuation episodes, and while they haven't been as successful in terms of views, it is elevated by being the only place to find a lot of valuable lore on Jupiter, which just isn't available anywhere else. As for Jupiter himself, well, it was difficult to get him back on his feet on TikTok, simply because every account he made would be quickly deleted. He was still back on the internet, which opened up an opportunity for him to engage with people. This opportunity would quickly materialize as the one and only Linda approached him once again for a full-fledged interview, which was released on YouTube on the 24th of October, most likely being the actual last interview. It's interesting to contrast this interview with all of the previous ones by Linda. While Linda continues to play the character to keep Jupiter interested, who frankly seems quite convinced there's actually something between them, she cuts down massively on making any jokes, and the whole interview is largely focused on interrogating Jupiter in a much more solemn manner. He does also say he loves Linda, which, while possibly just a troll, it's not unlikely it's true. As soon as the video starts, Linda asks about all of the things Jupiter's been accused of, and instead of dismissing it aggressively as he usually would, Jupiter's answer here is a lot more sober. That's not to say he takes responsibility, blaming all of it for being high on nicotine and alcohol.
I understand it, and I was trying so hard to keep things under wraps, but at the same time,
Keep things
I
under
wasn't
wraps.
entirely sober at the time.
Sober.
Yeah, I wasn't sober. I was mostly high on nicotine or rum.
Will you smoke so many cigarettes that you mess with the minor? Then it goes on to bring up Jupiter's
What?
now ex-girlfriend, Abby. She claims that Abby's been in regular contact with her, and that she's reached a point where she no longer wants anything to do with Jupiter, which actually lines up with what she said in her interview with Siwa Moon. Some time is spent recounting some claims made by Abby, of which most had been in the interview. In particular, she mentions how he and Abby started dating when she was 16 years old. This does contradict an earlier statement made by Abby in the Siwa Moon interview, although the reason for this discrepancy isn't very obvious. It's possible Abby has since corrected the record, or maybe Linda simply got it wrong. Among other things, Linda asked Jupiter if he had truly physically abused her, and Jupiter responds to these allegations quite harshly.
She said that you inappropriately touched her and you were hurt.
Yeah, I didn't know that she did, and she didn't know. I didn't know.
It's also worth noting that while Jupiter denies ever doing anything to Abby, he does admit to having tried to strangle his sister when adopted by Linda, but again, he doesn't take his responsibility, saying he was much younger than his sister had claimed when the incident happened, and therefore, it's just not that bad.
That was a long time ago. I was a child.
You were 18.
I was a child. I was 14, not 18.
Linda does bring up that there were multiple instances of him doing this to his sister, but he deflects further by saying he was too young to really criticize him for. It's a mystery how this is supposed to exonerate him for attempted murder, considering it's fairly clear that while clearly mentally challenged, he understood the consequences of game-ending someone, even at that age. On a later note, some more amusing things were brought up throughout the video, including a status update on his power, where he revealed he's not a half-vampire, half-werewolf, but a werewolf-vampire demon dragon hybrid. He also assures us he does not in fact wear diapers, and that his sister had lied when she said that. He also talks about how, being a paranormal expert, he's been doing a lot of research at the library, where he actually spends most of his time these days due to the free Wi-Fi. The interview part of the video concludes with Jupiter demanding that Anonymous stop harassing him and his family, and after a curt goodbye, the call ends. Linda goes on to talk about everything for the next 6 minutes, repeating her pledge to put him in prison, while lamenting the fact that gathering evidence has been extremely tough. Overall, this interview was probably the least consequential, as the main takeaway from it is that Jupiter is not in prison, and there's little chance of him being arrested in the foreseeable future. But it does confirm that Abby found a way to get out of her miserable relationship with Jupiter, which I'm sure many would find comforting. This wasn't the last we'd see of Jupiter, though. A month later, Linda would release another interview with him, which went on to be a bit more interesting than the last one. From the get-go, we start off with a brand new accusation, which Jupiter is quick to confirm when Linda tells him she's aware of some girl he had sent pictures to on Kick. Jupiter, while not denying it, clearly wants to move on from the topic, getting quite agitated the more Linda talks about it.
Okay, can we drop that? Now it's making me feel even more agitated. Can we drop it?
Sorry, yeah, I'll drop it.
From early on, we also find out he's been engaged on Facebook to some girl named Xena, although it hasn't been made clear who that is. From pretty early on, what you'll notice is that Jupiter seems a bit more hostile towards Linda than usual. He tells her that he's genuinely upset by the fact that she would openly expose him to the masses. Amusingly, she told him that she was very sorry about it, which Jupiter seems to take at face value instead of realizing that it's an obvious lie. Especially considering that if he'd actually been paying attention, Linda has repeatedly said she wants him in jail forever, and that she's trying desperately to have that done.
You were opening a whole can of worms. I was upset that you would do something like that behind my back without clarifying what came with me first. And then when you posted me in a negative light, what the hell is that about?
I know, we already had this conversation. I said I was sorry.
But I'm just letting you know that I'm still upset. Even though you said you're sorry, I'm still upset with you.
The topic of Abby is brought up once again, this time by Jupiter. It seems he's given up on trying to get in their pants at this point, as he's quite openly berating her in front of Linda, telling her she's lied about everything.
And I do want you to know that bitch Abby lied about everything. You know she was lying.
The topic of what happened between them is discussed in brief, as Jupiter explains he had tried to contact her in the interim, but that he was unable to, after which he had blocked Linda for a while. More interestingly, though, this is followed by Jupiter talking about his two brothers. He complains that his family's criminal history is being shared online. Very notably, Jupiter actually defends his brother Duke, calling him a good guy, and even more notably, he reveals that he has actually forgiven his brother Shane. Linda takes the time to be coy about it, leading to Jupiter writing her a message, which Linda later reads out. Possibly the most interesting thing in this video is an inadvertent admission on Jupiter's part that he's actually facing some kind of charges that he believes he can beat.
The hater's gonna hate, and I'm still gonna live, because I know in my heart, in my own heart, that I'm gonna beat these charges. I'm gonna beat them. I'm gonna beat the odds. Because I have people like you, like Dana, and a bunch of other people who support me. I still have you guys on my side.
Now, we don't know what these charges are. There isn't much in the way of evidence online, but it seems more serious than he may have let on previously. There's a rather long section of Jupiter rambling about how he finds finds Linda attractive and how despite everything that's happened between them, he's still in love with her. He goes on to say that despite him getting engaged to this Xena character, he will still hook up with Linda, as long as she doesn't reveal it online. In a continued display of his very likely schizophrenia diagnosis, Jupiter also reveals he's actually been communicating with Linda telepathically, and that he's been hearing her thoughts in his mind over the last couple of months.
Let's just say I hear your thoughts sometimes, and it scares me because you cross over to the dark side sometimes. You go media kind of dark, and I'm like, gonna make things blind. Sometimes I see the pictures that you send me in your own mind of what you want me to believe, and it makes me blush.
This goes on for an uncomfortably long period of time with Linda, being the committed troll that she is, plays along, leading to a very interesting discussion that I'd rather not talk about. Instead, we can talk about how he's still talking to his plushies, and in particular, he talks to his daughter, Maria, disciplining her for allegedly calling Linda a...
You deserve that one. Ever. Just saying someone I care about is like, or even disrespect your mom. I will have your little flame. Understand? Good.
In another display of his horrifying violent tendencies, Jupiter actually admits one of the reasons he's been acting so close in the last interview is because he wanted to rip Linda to shreds. He does mention that isn't the case anymore, but not before telling her how if he really wanted her to, she already would be. This may be a less serious threat than the others he's made, as when he asked about how he would do it, he said he would use his SSI benefits to hire a hit. He goes on to reiterate that, living in Idaho, he has keen knowledge of where he can hide a body, thus using this to further threaten his role with haters. The interview is cut short, as even Linda, who at this point has been a stunningly dedicated actor, couldn't seem to deal with the threats of violence. The last couple minutes are spent with her talking about how she couldn't listen to him anymore, and just her sharing her own mental state, and admitting she's scared for her life. She also admits that she doesn't really enjoy doing this, and that at this point, she's not even sure she should publish the much-hyped documentary.
All in all, this is not something that I want to be doing. I don't want to be talking to Jupiter. I just feel a lot of pressure. I feel a lot of pressure because I know a lot of these people that follow me don't care. They only just want to see what Jupiter is doing, what Jupiter's up to. Why am I still talking to him? Well, when I got on the call, I thought that I would get enough evidence that I could include in the documentary I made. But now, I'm scared if I put out the documentary, he would... And no, I am not receiving any telepathic pictures.
And that's about where our story ends. There have been no real new developments outside of two more rather excellent videos by Mr. Snowflake, which, while not getting as much attention, did provide some valuable insight using clips and videos from Jupiter's YouTube channel, which previously were relatively unknown. I've made a lot of videos about a lot of weird people. Some of them are just embarrassing like DSP, and some of them are refreshingly interesting and cordial people outside of a few clips like Vegan Gains. Jupiter, though, is quite different. It doesn't suffice to say that he's a bad person, because that's something you could probably say about half the people on this website. What he is, though, is one of the most mentally disturbed and downright despicable individuals I've ever covered. There's not any real silver lining, there's no happy ending. Despite the efforts of so many people to put this man in jail, all that's really been done is that this guy's been thoroughly milked for all the content that there possibly could be, with not a lot in the way of real-world progress. Likewise, by restricting him from platforms where he's in the public eye, Jupiter is out of the spotlight, and now there's no telling what he could be up to. Given what we know about him, I reckon it's not something he'd want us to know about right now. I've been Turkey Tom, thanks for watching, and until next time, leave me alone.
Leave me alone.
So I recently made a video talking about my immediate shock at the information that Bethesda seeming...
TikTok is the largest short...
So I've been watching this show. I watched the majority of Rings of Power. I will admit, I did not finish Rings of Power. The reason why is that I was watching it with my dad, and my dad was unable to watch the show without falling asleep. Like, physically incapable of watching the show without falling asleep. And by the way, yeah, he's an old man, right? But if
He's
we're
not an old
watching
man.
a war movie, or something about something where he can tell me he can talk to me about how much he knows more than the movie, right? He's gonna be talking to me during the movie, and I fucking hate that. But he doesn't. And anyway, but yeah, with this, I'm pretty sure even at the starting screen he had passed the fuck out. But it never bothered, Rings of Power never bothered me. And the reason why it didn't is that I just knew it as fan fiction. Just it, yeah. It's the same as like that Shadow of Mordor, like, oh, you can make a blue one ring? No? Like, what the fuck? Like, yeah, like, I didn't give a shit about that.
As a kid, I used to tell a story about an overpowered elf girl who, after a tragic loss, travels through a fantasy realm to fight evil alongside diverse, quirky characters. If you thought I was talking about the Lord of the Rings of Power, you'd be wrong. Let's face it, the Rings of Power had a chance.
To be fair, though, like
the Lord of the Rings of Power.
The one thing that we did get,
let's face it,
we got a few really fucking badass scenes. This is one of them. This was fucking awesome.
The Rings of Power had a chance to be a good show, but ultimately failed to capture the whimsical nature of Tolkien's work. Luckily, Frieren, Beyond Journey's End, or So No Frieren, is everything the Rings of Power wishes it could be, and does more justice to Tolkien's work without even using the same name or characters. But what I found most interesting is the surprising similarities between Frieren and Galadriel, as they both share similar character traits, motivations, and even some of the same flaws. Of course, just having those traits doesn't necessarily make a character well written. I know there are a ton of YouTubers who already ragged on Galadriel, calling her a Mary Sue, and even speculating that she may in fact be Sauron in disguise. So it's great to have Frieren as an example of how you could make a likable Galadriel. I highly recommend you watch at least episode 1 of So No Frieren for context. It's only around 20 minutes long, and you will pretty much get everything you need to know about the story and the character. And while I'm not planning to spoil anything that you wouldn't find in the synopsis, it may lessen the impact of your initial viewing experience. For fairness, I guess you can...
Yeah, I watched, I'm up to the episode on Frieren, where the fuck? It's where, like, the guy gets the girl a birthday present, she gets mad at him because he didn't get her one in time. Like, yeah, at 14 or 15, something like that. Yeah, like, I'm pretty far into it.
Watch the first episode of Rings of Power 2. Yeah. Also, I gotta be honest with you, whatever character analysis I do of Galadriel may not even be accurate. Since her character is so one-dimensional, I'm afraid I might make her sound too complex and interesting than she actually is. With all that out of the way, let's start. Both Frieren and Galadriel set off on their adventure after the death of a loved one. For Galadriel, it was her older brother Finrod. And for Frieren, it was her friend and fellow adventurer Himmel. Both shows make it pretty clear that those deaths had a massive impact on the protagonists and kickstarted the whole story. So I
think one reason why Frieren is better and it's better written is that there are a lot more things in the show that aren't outwardly stated. Like, one problem that I think a lot of like Western shows have now is that there's never any subtlety in any of the, like, any sort of medium. There's never any subtlety. Everything is so outward and, like, overt. And, like, you can even compare this to spoon-fed, right? Yeah, it is. You can even compare this to, like, older movies that, like, it's not like that anymore. Media literacy is dead. I don't know really why. I mean, it could be, like, a bunch of different reasons, but yeah, I think that's true.
It's important to take a look specifically at how those tragic events are presented to the audience. After all, if the viewers are to stick around for the journey, they have to be empathetic to the goals of the protagonist.
Yeah.
To make the death of a loved one impactful, a writer has to make them likable or at least establish a strong bond between them and the protagonist. The stronger the bond, the more tragic the loss is to both the protagonist and the viewer. Most writers know this, so they spend time building up the loved one in the story. There are a ton of great examples. So let's see how the Rings of Power and So No Frieren handled this trope. In the Rings of Power, we get to see Galadriel's childhood and Finrod's role in it. Finrod appears to be a caring older brother and a mentor to Galadriel. At least that's what I think the show's trying to establish. The lesson Finrod teaches doesn't really make sense.
The stone sees only downward.
And also, like, one thing that annoyed me about this is that think about how badass it would have been if you actually got the scene of Ungoliant and Melkor, and Ungoliant actually, like, draining the life out of the trees of Valinor. And we didn't get that. Why the fuck not? That would have been awesome. It would be insane. Yeah, it would be super cool.
Darkness of the world is vast, irresistible.
I think the writer's trying to make the scene appear more deep and profound, but lacks the wisdom to actually make it profound. The worst thing is that having Galadriel and Finrod just sitting around talking in a monotonous voice doesn't help establish a strong familial bond. Not only is it visually boring, it makes the relationship appear cold and distant.
But you must learn to discern them for yourself. I won't always be here to speak them to you.
You won't?
I'm just as confused as Galadriel. Why would Finrod say that? I hope he's not implying that he will die, because the show establishes that death isn't even a concept among the elves at this point.
We had no word for death, for we thought our joys would be unending.
So technically he could always be around.
Yeah,
then again,
exactly.
I'm not sure he wants to. There's nothing to indicate that they actually like each other. When he tells her to come home with him, Galadriel just stands there and watches him go alone. Why? I don't get it. I thought they were meant to have a close relationship. Why couldn't you have...
Well, I think it's just all like trying to like make it foreshadowing for the fact that he's gonna die. Right? It's like, again, like there's the lack of subtlety.
Them walk together, hold hands maybe. Maybe have her looking up at him while they walk next to each other. Anything
I
to
don't care about this. Oh, my patience for a lot of this is gone. It's kind of funny. A lot of it. Oh my god. They're all like the same exact stupid copycat idiots. Like I look at this and I'm like, oh god, watching weather reports would be more entertaining. Let's listen to that.
Beginning with Jack Smith, the experience he has, the appeals that we're seeing on that case in January, your thoughts?
Trump, go to jail.
Well,
Trump, go to jail.
Uniquely qualified to prosecute former head of state. But as you pointed out, he doesn't have a perfect track record. And so I think, you know, in my experience, Ari, I learned a lot more from my defeats than I did from my victories, as both when I was a prosecutor and as a defense attorney. I actually think he's using that to construct a case that is more airtight against Trump. And I think you can see by the way punches, not by not charging insurrection, by not taking on some of the First Amendment issues that he did, by trying to go directly to the Supreme Court to deal with an issue that now could potentially delay his case. I actually think you see Jack Smith being more careful than he has been in the past to try to have an airtight conviction here.
Yeah, and we're drawn on that experience here as we look at a year that, of course, began in many ways with Donald Trump's indictments, and that was something that now has been sort of absorbed as part of American life, law, and politics, and yet was a big deal. January next month, we'll have the D.C. Court of Appeals hearing the coup case, and so Renato, on that case, which everyone's watching, I want to mention that Jack Smith just today did ask the court to continue to bar Donald Trump from using any conspiracy theories in that case, which again, he has to win the appeal. Smith, though, writing, basically the court should reject any disinformation and attempts to inject what the DOJ calls politics into the proceeding. Meanwhile, Michigan Supreme Court also had a ruling that will echo for many people, because we're tracking this over the course of December. We've seen this go both ways, but Trump will remain on that state's ballot, according to the court. And the United States Supreme Court, of course, is not yet getting involved in the DOJ coup case. Jack Smith actually was trying to invite them in, Renato, as you know, to speed it up. Your thoughts on all of that and what we expect to be, if this trend line continues, an election year next year, Iowa caucus next month, January appeals court, January 9th appeals hearing on this. All of this stuff's going to keep kicking around.
Yeah, pretty busy for a slow news day, right? First of all, look, what Jack Smith filed in that motion, he was 100% on target, Ari. All of those points that Trump might try to make or his attorneys might try to make during the trial are completely irrelevant as to whether or not he's guilty as charged. It's irrelevant what his thoughts are about, Joe Biden, or whether he thinks the prosecution's political. Of course, the challenge is going to be, will Judge Chutkan be able to shut down his attorneys when they try to make those arguments anyways, in defiance of her order? And that's what I anticipate happening. It's a showdown that has occurred in many criminal trials. As defense attorneys want to insert irrelevant, unimportant factoids into the trial to try to sway the jury. So that's going to happen, and that's going to unfold the trial. I think it's going to be a dramatic moment. As far as the Michigan Supreme Court goes, I'm not surprised, because that appeal only dealt with the primary ballot. There are some provisions of Michigan law that make clear that under Michigan law, everyone has to be listed on the primary ballot, regardless of whether they're eligible. However, I do think that that's something that is still going to get ultimately up to the United States Supreme Court from that Colorado case. And given the composition of the United States Supreme Court, we can't be completely positive about how that's going to turn out. Donald Trump.
Yeah, and that's news just about the court in Michigan. There's separate news dating back to the pressure Trump put on Michigan officials in 2020. Karl Rove, who's a very conservative Republican, although doesn't agree with Trump on everything, and you could be a conservative Republican without supporting coups, as you know, Renato, talking about how that call, which involved then-President Trump and then losing outgoing President Trump, as well as the party chair of the GOP, and what that means. Take a listen.
Real quick, is this a problem for Ronna McDaniel as well? She's usually very cautious about things like this.
Oh, I think it is. I think the chairman is in trouble here, because she's saying to them, if you agree to change your decision on certification in Wayne County, we'll get you lawyers to stand by you. And again, I think that was highly inappropriate.
Renato, as we go towards the busy January and the Iowa caucus and the official start of the presidential campaign, you have these kind of skirmishes going, and we've said the courts will also adjudicate who broke which laws. Some people have been convicted related to Jan 6, some people have not. The certification battles, for example, have not resulted in many convictions yet. But how should we, as thinking people, and you as a prosecutor, as a member of the bar, how should we think about the fact that so much of this has been normalized in mainline, where it's right up to or over the line of adjudicating an election without fraud or crime?
I will tell you, that's the reason that the case that we have in the January 6th case, and some of these other cases, by the way, there is a prosecution in Michigan of some officials there. There is also a matter in Arizona. Of course, we have the prosecution think really the timing that we have of these cases is so important because, as you point out, the Iowa caucus is weeks away. And we ultimately have the Republican Party married Donald Trump and basically committing themselves to him even before we know whether or not he's being convicted of a felony. So very, very serious time for our democracy. And ultimately, I think these court cases in many ways are going to determine the future of our constitutional system here in the United States.
Yeah, and briefly, before I lose you here, Renato, when you look at the D.C. Court of Appeals reviewing Donald Trump's request to get total immunity, which there's not great precedent for that. Nixon took a pardon precisely because no one thought he had immunity from everything after leaving the White House. If the D.C. Court of Appeals says no, there's no immunity, do you expect the Supreme Court to leave that alone, or do you expect them to take that case, which could have the functional result of vastly delaying Jack Smith's timeline?
I actually think the United States Supreme Court will take its sweet time and then decide not to take the case. That's what I think is going to happen. Ultimately, I don't really think that the majority of the justices of the United States Supreme Court are in any hurry to speed Donald Trump to his trial. But at the end of the day, I think they're going to want to duck a decision that would be a blow against Donald Trump because it's indefensible, the arguments he's making. They're novel. In other words, never been made before because no president's been indicted before. But they're also absurd, and I can't imagine a majority of this Supreme Court, even who they are, signing on to that.
Imagine you suddenly lose your father, and then your mother abandons you. Imagine you then spend your childhood in and out of foster homes and orphanages, working on farms for almost no money. That was the brutal reality for the founder of Domino's Pizza. And the story of how he turned his life around and built a billion-dollar empire is incredible. However, this is not a straightforward success story. Domino's has faced multiple scandals, including million-dollar lawsuits over their deadly drivers, a disgusting viral video that threatened their entire reputation, a literal hostage situation because of their bizarre mascots, and at that time where Domino's basically admitted that pizzas were terrible. At times, the Domino's story is a tragedy, and yet at other times, it's an incredible tale of innovation and perseverance. It's filled with lessons, controversy, and multiple twists. Honestly, I don't think the full Domino's story has ever been told quite like this until now. So sit back and relax as we're going on a journey into the insane history of Domino's. Thomas Monahan was born on the 25th of March 1937 in Ann Arbor, Michigan. His father was a truck driver and his mother was trying to finish nursing school. Whilst the family weren't well off, he got by just fine, and it was a happy start to life for Tom and his little brother Jim, but it didn't last long. Tom's father soon developed an infection in his abdomen due to severe ulcers, and on Christmas Eve 1941, when he was 4 years old, his father passed away, and his descended into a nightmare. The first few weeks after his father's death were a blur, but Tom vividly remembered visiting the funeral home and seeing his father lying in the casket and screaming at his father to wake up. Meanwhile, without the income from Tom's father, Tom's mother abandoned her nursing plans and got a job at the Argus Camera Company, making $27.50 a week. Unfortunately, it quickly became clear she couldn't afford to raise the two kids by herself, and thus she put Tom and his brother Jim into a foster home. Her plan was to go back to nursing school and get a higher paying job, then come back to look after the kids herself when she could afford to. But in reality, it would be 7 years before that happened, and the brothers would be in and out of various foster homes and orphanages in that time. The brothers understandably struggled with this, and it didn't help that Tom's first foster parents were very strict and argued constantly. Then, after 2 years, the foster parents decided they no longer wanted to look after Tom and Jim, so the brothers were sent off to a Catholic boarding school instead. St. Joseph's Home for Boys, which was both a school and an orphanage run by nuns. Tom later described his time there as intensely unhappy. On his first day at the school, he ended up getting into a fight with another kid. In fact, Tom was fairly small and got picked on quite a bit, but he had a fierce temper and would fight back, often getting into scrapes with the other children. And even the teachers were brutal. You were whipped if you put a foot wrong. Whilst at that boarding school, Tom would often dream of a very young future for himself. He one day told the class that when he was older, he wanted to be a priest, an architect, and a shortstop for the Detroit Tigers. The kids laughed at him, telling him to do all that. But Tom had a lot of ambition. Despite how challenging life was, Tom regularly told people that one day he was going to be rich and famous. And the boarding school did instill Tom with a strong work ethic and a mindset that no matter how tough things get, don't give up. By 1949, Tom's mother finally returned. She was now a qualified nurse, and so the boys went to live with her again, as she felt she could finally afford to raise her kids. She was wrong. Their financial woes were far from over, and Tom had to take on odd jobs himself to help support the family. He found a job selling newspapers, a job picking cherries in the summers, and when he had time, he would go sell fresh produce from door to door. In all of these jobs, he would often try to think of ways the process could be more efficient so he could make more money. This was Tom's first brush with sales and entrepreneurship, which he really seemed to enjoy, but his life at home was not so great. Him and his mother were in constant arguments, and their relationship became more and more strained, until eventually Tom's mother put him and his brother back into foster care. They'd only been living with her for just over a year, but one day Tom's mother broke down and said she couldn't handle being both their mother and father. So once again, the two boys were in and out of different homes. Although at one point, Tom's brother went back to live with their mother, whilst Tom got shipped out to live on a farm, where he worked extremely long hours. But it was on that farm whilst working one day that Tom was struck with an epiphany. He later said, "Standing up to my ankles in muck, I saw that I had been wallowing in crass, worldly thoughts when I should have been concentrating on my spiritual quest. I decided then and there I would become a priest." His time with the nuns had clearly influenced him, and so he applied to St. Joseph's Seminary in Michigan, and was thrilled when he got accepted in 1952. And Tom felt at home here. He thought he'd finally found his true calling in life. But less than a year later, he got kicked out. Tom later reflected that he was a little mischievous, breaking minor rules, talking when he shouldn't, being a little rowdy, but nothing serious. Tom believes the real reason he was kicked out was because of a letter from his mother where she asked why he never wrote home much. All the other kids wrote to their parents at least once a week, but since Tom obviously had a difficult relationship with his mum, he wrote to his aunt more instead. But the seminary had strict family values, and Tom was told to pack his bags. He broke down crying. His dream of becoming a priest was shattered, and he later said, "Never before or since have I felt so crushed." To make matters worse, Tom had no other option but to move back in with his manic depressive mother. His mum wasn't happy either to find Tom back on her doorstep, and almost immediately they began their usual arguments. Now, to be fair, they were both as bad as each other. His mum was known for throwing temper tantrums and having mood swings, but Tom himself could be extremely argumentative and grow aggressive. It was a bad combination. They were also still low on cash. Tom's clothes had holes in, and so did his shoes, so he was constantly embarrassed at school. The one thing they did have though was an old car, which one day Tom borrowed without telling his mum where he was going. She got so worked up that she called the police on him. Tom was so angry she'd done that, he decided to spend the night in jail rather than go home and apologize to his mum. But he thought that was the end of it, just another one of their fights. But it wasn't. Several days later, when Tom was walking home, a car pulled over and a county sheriff told him his mother had signed papers putting him in a juvenile detention home when he was 18. So just to recap, since his dad had died, he'd been in foster homes, then a boarding school for nuns, then when he came back home, his mum sent him off to the farm, and now he was being sent to a juvenile detention home. Tom was furious. In his eyes, his mum had ruined his chance of becoming a priest, and now, even though he'd not committed any crime, he was essentially being locked up and described as a delinquent. He couldn't understand why he was being treated like a criminal. Tom stayed in the detention home through his junior year of high school, and these were some of the darkest times of his life. But luckily, Tom finally got some good news. When his Aunt Peg found out where he was, she petitioned the courts to get custody of him. His aunt and uncle were kind to him, and for the first time in a long while, Tom's life felt more stable and normal. Tom continued to do odd jobs to earn money. He worked in a bowling alley, he was a busboy, and countless others. But between work and getting distracted by girls, Tom didn't do so well at school. He just didn't care about it that much. And at one point, it didn't even look like he'd graduate high school. It was only when he saw his aunt making preparations for his graduation that he realized he didn't want to let him down. So Tom pleaded with his teachers not to hold him back a year, and he did just enough to graduate last in his class. But he did graduate. His year that quote under his photo was, "The harder I try to be good, the worse I get. But I may do something sensational yet." Shortly after, Tom enrolled in Ferris State College, and this time he worked hard. He improved his grades and then got accepted at the University of Michigan. However, he couldn't afford to pay the tuition fees. But that's when he heard that his college would be paid for if he joined the army. So Tom spent the next few days getting physicals, taking tests, and signing forms, intending to join the army. Except just as he almost finished with the registration process, he noticed one of the forms that said Marine Corps. Tom said, "Wait, is this the Marine Corps or the Army?" The guy looked back at him incredulously and said, "It's the Marines, you dummy." But at this point, Tom decided to go with it anyway, and use his time in the Marines to work on both his physical and mental health. Which, to be fair, he did. Whilst there, he also read a lot of self-improvement books, and in later life he reflected, "I knew if I could survive the Marines, I could handle anything." During his time in the Marines though, Tom would constantly daydream about his future empire. He would think about all the cars, homes and planes that he was going to buy. And so in 1959, when Tom received an honourable discharge from the Marines, he set out to begin building his dream. By this point, he saved about $2,000 to pay for his college tuition. Unfortunately, once again, Tom's life did not go to plan. Before he could enroll in college, Tom fell for a get-rich-quick scheme and lost every penny he had. It all began when Tom met a charismatic man who said his name was John Ryan, and that he worked in the oil business. He enthralled Tom with stories of the big deals he made, and told Tom of a new project he had his eyes on that he just needed investors for. Through an elaborate story, the scammer managed to convince Tom to invest his money for part ownership in an oil well, which the guy claimed it was guaranteed to make a profit within just a few weeks. But of course, it never did. Tom's tuition fee money was gone, Tom was left with just $15. On top of everything else, Tom started getting severe headaches and earaches. And at times the pain was so bad he couldn't concentrate on anything else. He would only later find out he had a ruptured and infected eardrum. But once again, despite the difficult circumstances, Tom worked hard and tried to save every cent he could and eventually managed to enroll in college. Except this time, he had to defer, because he had no money to pay for the books and was working so much he didn't have time for his practice. So he vowed he would continue to save money even longer to try again next semester. As you can see, Tom's early life was really just a string of unfortunate events. And again, repeatedly hit. Just when he thought he was making progress, something new would go wrong. Sure, some of it was self-inflicted, like his argumentative nature or the naivety to fall for the oil scammer, but there was no doubt Tom had been unlucky at the start. So, faced with this new setback, Tom began thinking of ways to earn more money. And he soon got a job at a newspaper distributor and started selling newspaper subscriptions. And he quickly managed to gain a lot of customers by offering to deliver the papers to their doorstep. This was Tom's first brush with the delivery business. Little did he know that in just a few years, he was going to revolutionize the industry by delivering pizzas to his doorstep. But this experience with the newspaper was crucial though, not just because he earned money, but because of the skills he learned. Once Tom proved his value, the owner began teaching him more about the business side of things, like bookkeeping and dealing with suppliers. At one point, the owner even had to explain to Tom what a memo was. But it was here that Tom learned the basics of running a business, and he found that he not only enjoyed it, but seemed to be good at it. And that's when, out of the blue, an even bigger business opportunity presented itself. One day, Tom's brother Jim came to him with an idea that would change everything. Tom's younger brother Jim was a full-time mailman, but in order to make extra money, he was also working at a restaurant owned by a man named Dominic Devati. Whilst working there, Jim overheard Dominic saying that he owned another restaurant in Michigan that had been shuttered for months, and he was trying to sell it. The restaurant was named after him, simply called Dominic's, and it was a small hole-in-the-wall pizzeria that also sold sandwiches. But Dominic said he hadn't had any success with it, and he wanted to sell it as soon as possible. He was asking for only $500 for the store, but that also came with over $2,000 worth of debt, which the buyer would have to take on. Still, it was a relatively cheap price, and when Jim overheard this, it filled him with excitement. He approached his brother Tom and asked him if he wanted to go in on the store together, since Jim didn't think he could do it by himself, but figured they could manage it between them. The store only opened 7 hours a day, from 5 PM until midnight, so they could split shifts between them so Jim could continue his other steady job as a mailman, and Tom would have enough time to study and fulfill his dream of going to college. It seemed a win-win, and sure enough, Tom was on board. Neither brother had much money, but they took the little savings they had and also took out a $900 loan from the post office credit union, which was enough to buy the store off Devati and cover their initial startup costs. Dominic Devati let the brothers keep using his name for the business, so it would still be called Dominic's. And Devati also shared with with them his sauce recipe and quickly showed them how to make pizza. Since neither Tom or Jim had done it before, the brothers then hired 2 laid-off factory workers to do deliveries who agreed to work solely on commission. The brothers then officially opened Dominic's for business on December 9th, 1960. Their total sales that first week amounted to just $19. To be honest, it was surprising they even made that much. They didn't even have a phone for the first week. They were relying on customers walking through the door. But once they got everything up and running, things did begin to look up. Sales were at $750 a week by next week. And I'd like to tell you, this is a heartwarming story of 2 brothers who had a rough start in life, teaming up together and having amazing success. But I can't tell you. It turns out most of their sales were to a nearby college. And so when the semester ended and the students left campus, sales fell to just $200 a week. Before long, Jim began working on the store much less, which inevitably led to several long arguments between the brothers, including one where they began throwing plates at each other. And within just 8 months of opening the store, Jim quit completely, despite the fact it was his idea originally. But Jim just felt the store demanded far more work and time than he'd anticipated. And since the business was not very profitable at this point, Jim didn't want to leave his steady full-time job to fully commit to the business. He wanted out. So Tom agreed to give Jim the Volkswagen Beetle they used for delivering the pizzas in exchange for his half of the business. Given that this business would go on to be worth billions of dollars, trading 50% ownership for an old car has got to be one of the worst business deals imaginable, especially since Jim would go on to be a security guard and an electrician, but never have much financial success. But at the time, back in the early 60s, it seemed like Jim had got the better deal. Tom was left all on his own with a 100% ownership of a struggling business. And thus, Tom had no choice but to step up his involvement in Dominic's after Jim's departure. This meant once again his college dream was shattered as he had to go all in on the business now he didn't have Jim to help. But like always, Tom got to work. He said, "In that instant, I made the decision to commit myself, heart and soul, to being a pizza man." Tom knew it was going to be tough though. At one point, he was so low on money, he ended up living in the store for a little while, sleeping there at night. He certainly couldn't afford a decent meal, and would only eat his own pizzas if they were burnt or a customer didn't pick it up and it was going to be thrown away. Tom was working 100-hour weeks. But slowly but surely, he was making progress. He was eventually able to hire 2 more employees to help make pizzas, while still netting $400 a week in profit. And when he wasn't...
$1,600 a week? Let's just do the math on that. Listen to this jackass speaks, makes me fucking sick. You know, what do we say here, right? What did he say? We got to make sure he said what he said.
I didn't pick it up and it was going to be thrown away. Tom was working 100-hour weeks. But slowly but surely, he was making progress. He was eventually able to hire 2 more employees to help make pizzas, while still netting $400 a week.
So $400 a week after paying for employees, right? Let's do the old veritable math. $1,600 a week, or $1,600 a month, excuse me, times 12 is that old $19,200. And he spent the rest of it on employees.
And when he wasn't working at the store, he was doing market research. He sampled nearly every pizza store in the nearby area, taking note of what each one did well and what it didn't. During his research, Tom was lucky enough to strike up a conversation with the owner of a local old Italian restaurant who had the best pizza sauce he'd ever tasted. And luckily, he volunteered to show Tom exactly how he made his sauce. Tom then implemented this for himself and Dominic, and his pizzas immediately started getting better, and sales increased further. When things picked out with his first Dominic store, Tom began to think he could do the same thing in other college towns. In fact, someone even told him about Mount Pleasant, the home of Central Michigan University and its 5,000 students, which Tom became convinced would be a perfect spot to open a second pizzeria in San Francisco. Of course, when his brother Jim had left the business, Tom would need someone else he could trust to run the original Dominic store if he was going to open another store 100 miles away. And the good news was, he was about to meet his future partner. The bad news is this partner would destroy everything Tom had worked so hard for. A man named Jim Gilmore stopped by the store one day, and Tom recognized him immediately. Gilmore had previously founded one of the city's best-known pizzerias, and so the two men got chatting about the pizza business. Tom was immediately impressed by this older guy's knowledge and experience in the industry. Gilmore did eventually admit that he had wise because of the drinking habit, but he said he'd overcome that and now wanted to get back to the business. Tom took the bait and asked Gilmore if he wanted to continue. And Tom explained his idea of opening a second store but needing someone to run his first store. proposal on the condition they would be equal partners in the business. Tom knew he needed help, so he agreed. The deal was Gilmore would put in $500 for 50% ownership of the business. Although Gilmore said he didn't have the cash right now. Tom was so desperate for help though, he said Gilmore could pay him later, thus essentially trading half his company for no down payment, and he would never get that money. Now, this deal with Gilmore wasn't an outright scam like the middleman scheme with Alldayerrydaybaby. This deal with Gilmore could later be described as the most one-sided partnership in history. You see, Gilmore had his attorney work on a meaningful partnership, but it put all the residency checks as Tom's responsibility. Gilmore also said he'd be keeping his day job as a dorm clerk, but since Dominic's was only open in the evenings, he told Tom he'd have plenty of time to run the store, meaning Tom could open a second pizzeria in Mount Pleasant like he wanted. In theory, it all sounded good. In reality, it was a disaster. With Gilmore in charge of the first Dominic store, it became much better than before. Sales were down a third. Gilmore began asking Tom to send more money to help him build. Tom was so busy with the second store that he only later realized what a terrible job Gilmore had done of running the first store. The pizza quality had dropped massively, and money was wasted on pizza canning and pinball. Some even suspected Gilmore may have used his Now, to be fair, Gilmore had given Tom a lot of advice, so it's not like he'd completely done nothing. But it just didn't seem like Gilmore had to drive too much work himself. Tom was working non-stop, most of his waking hours 7 days a week. Meanwhile, Gilmore just seemed to work whenever he felt like it. In other words, Gilmore was taking advantage of him. Eventually though, Gilmore's health deteriorated further, and the two men talked about splitting up the partnership. Gilmore once again proposed an offer that was ridiculously one-sided, where he would get way more money than he deserved. But thankfully this time, Tom had the sense to hire his own attorney, and eventually their lawyers reached an agreement, and Tom finally got out of this disastrous partnership with Gilmore. Of course, that certainly didn't mean Tom's problems were over. He was now back on his own, and actually left in debt because of this previous arrangement. At one point, his lawyer advised him he might be better off filing for bankruptcy, but Tom vowed he'd instead work his way out of it. And indeed, Tom continued to work almost all hours of the day, often returning home about 4:30 AM. Having said that, Tom did find a lot of fulfillment in the work, and the job was finally about to lead him to some good news. One night in February 1962, Tom left a trainee behind the counter as he decided to go deliver a pizza order for himself. And it was on that delivery he met a girl named Margie. Now, even though Tom was often shy around girls, hadn't been on a date in at least a year because of his busy moving with the store, he was so drawn to Margie he eventually struck up the courage to ask her out. Shortly after, it was Valentine's Day, and he sent her a heart-shaped pizza. By their third date, he knew she was the one he wanted to marry. And a year later, they were. At this point, Tom was 25 years old. But Tom told Margie he would be a millionaire by the time he was 30. She laughed, but he was serious. He was not going to stop working until he hit his goal. Unfortunately, Tom's work did sometimes cause problems for them. One night, Tom had got so stressed out by work, he drank extremely heavily, and he could be a mean drunk. He ended up yelling at Margie, and then when she got scared, it only made Tom even angrier. So much so, he accidentally knocked over the Christmas tree. The following morning, he vowed he would never drink like that again. Tom always had a temper and lack of self-control, and drinking exacerbated it. Tom kept his word about the drinking, but he would soon find himself in another argument. This time it was Dominic Devati, the man who had sold Tom and his brother their first pizza store originally. It was because of Dominic Devati that Tom's store was called Dominic's. That was the problem. Dominic Devati called Tom and told him he had to stop using the name Dominic's, as Devati was still using the name himself for his other restaurant, and his customers were apparently getting confused, thinking Tom's store was part of the same chain. Now, whilst it seemed they shared the same name, they were in town serving different customers, so Tom felt it was unlikely it was that much of an issue. Tom felt the bigger issue was that Devati was jealous Tom was starting to have more success with his stores than Devati was having. Perhaps Devati was a little bitter he'd given the store away at a relatively cheap price. Whatever the real reason, Devati demanded Tom stop using the name Dominic's. Now, as we know, Tom had always had a bit of a temper. When Tom heard this, he flipped out. Tom had an outburst where he accused Devati of being jealous and telling him his pizza sauce was terrible in comparison to his. Basically, it all got pretty ugly. And whereas they could have perhaps resolved things fairly amicably, Tom's outburst meant Devati got his lawyer to contact Tom and officially inform him he had to change names. The reason Tom was so reluctant to change names was because he'd been building Dominic's into a well-known brand in the area. Switching names at this point could definitely hurt his business. So Tom went to an advertising agency to seek advice. The obvious first choice was to simply rename it under Tom. Perhaps use his surname and call it Monaghan's Pizza. But it didn't really have the same ring to it. So the ad agency advised Tom to use something similar to Dominic's, since that's what everyone was used to. Plus, this was back in the days of people looking up places in a phone book. And so if Tom used a name that was very similar to Dominic's, people would still find his business if they looked up Dominic's in the phone book. So Tom tasked his employees with coming up with similar sounding names. And they went through at least 100 different versions, but none of them felt right. Until one day, one of Tom's delivery drivers burst through the door and said, "Tom, I've got the new name, Domino's." Something about it just clicked, and Tom excitedly shouted, "That's it, that's it."
This is one of the dumbest videos I've ever watched, and I'm just gonna erase it now. I'm sorry. No. Your fantasy, as you made this up as you go, is pretty well done. Because they keep pushing things that have 5 views. So I can't watch it. Let's try something new, huh? Can you do anything new, or I don't know, can you do anything new, or no? What? He ran an ult to save her. What an idiot. Oh, hey, you guys finally got kills, huh? Nice. Bye.
If you could take a pill that would make you smarter and live longer, would you? That's the promise of smart drugs, a part of the biohacking trend that's blowing up around the world. I'm a futurist. I fly all over the world these weeks as a keynote speaker and
with futurists, this is the thing. This is a profession. This is your
profession. Since the age of 10, I've been on computers. But really, right now, the dynamics of how we interact. I spend many hours every day reducing podcasts. This is one of the coolest things I think that I've read about most recently. There's this new trend that's gaining popularity right now. It's called biohacking, and it's changing how we operate.
We can think of our bodies as computer systems. So why not make every possible effort to optimize our inputs?
Biohacking is a combination of supplements, treatments, and smart drugs to make you smarter, stronger, and hopes to make you live longer.
It's like listening to some child make up a story to a. It's like listening to some child make up a story to a Final Fantasy game. Do you guys hear it? It's actually really funny.
This is real. It's a reality which feels.
This is real. Successful. Yeah, it's real to you fucking idiots because you just blow money on this all day.
And creative.
Yeah, and you give each other reality. Yeah.
In San Francisco, I wanted to find out if
San Francisco.
They work for me.
Will that work for you? Oh God, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I tried. It sounds so dumb to me. Oh no, look at all the dumb people try to talk. It's so alarming to me. Watching all these people try to scare each other makes me so sick in my soul. Oh no, hey, let's go click on that. Yeah, it's probably pretty good clickbait from 3 months ago. Yeah, let's take this inside look at homeless DoorDasher with master's degree of living in a car. No, I don't think I could do this. No, I think I'm.
Ukraine says.
I think I'm probably done with that. I'm probably done with it. Yeah, guys, I'm terribly sorry, but I looked for something intelligent on the internet, and I couldn't find it, including myself. So with that point, I'm going to stop. No intelligence on the internet. I'm terribly sorry. So what do you do? You just throw your hands up and you say thank you. I love you. My name is skycat.live. I have been at this for 13 hours and 45 minutes, and I love you guys and thank you for hanging out with me. Just a reminder: come to skycat.live and click on the cat's face to donate, or come to Twitch TV or YouTube. And thank you so much for your time. I am out. See you guys later. Love you. Bye.